Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Chad Calek, and welcome back to episode number 39 of the In a Crowded Room podcast, in which I'm going to answer a lot of your questions because they are stacking up now, which is awesome. So thank you all for not only posting questions in the comments, but Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. By the way, if you want to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, my handle is at AGHChad, simple enough. And the same thing on Facebook. I have two pages. I have Facebook/AGHChad and Facebook/Chad Calek, in which I source my questions from all of these locations. So let's jump right into it now. The first question is a bit of a softball question, but I think it's interesting, so I thought I would just answer it. And this question comes from Bill. He says, what other podcasts do you listen to or watch? I actually listen to a lot of different podcasts, and it seems to kind of change from time to time. But lately, I've been listening to Short Story Long, which is drama from the Fantasy Factory. I'm a huge Rob Dyrdek fan. I just think that guy is a business genius. And drama has really created a heck of a clothing brand, and it's a lot of business stuff. I suppose it's not the most exciting stuff in the world, but that's a good podcast. He has a lot of cool people on his show. And just for fun, lately I've been listening to Theo Vaughn's What Happened Last Weekend podcast, which is really funny. He's just a funny guy. And if you don't know Theo Vaughn, he's a comedian that runs around in the Rogan circle. And what I like about him is he's just super honest about his life and his struggles. And he goes through depression, and he's overcome a cocaine addiction before. And he's had a lot of relationship issues. His honesty is just incredibly refreshing in a world of bullshitters out there in the podcast world. So check those out if you get a chance. I think those are very good. And depending upon the guest, I do listen to Rogan. I'm a fan of the Rogan show, and he just gets awesome guests, you know. I go back to the Elon Musk podcast. I thought that was one of the most relevant, interesting podcasts I've seen in a long time. The Alex Jones podcast, both of them with him on there with Rogan, were incredible. I just wish that because Rogan talks so much about the paranormal and conspiracies, I wish there was a stronger representation of believers and researchers that can actually swing a bat for those of us who have experienced things instead of so many skeptics, which I talked about that obviously on the Joe Rogan Conspiracy podcast that I just released. Which I want to thank all of you for listening to that and chiming in. It's just always really cool to see you guys respond in a strong way to these podcasts. So let's move on to the next question. And this is more something that I wanted to respond to because it just blew my mind. On the Leaving Neverland podcast, there's a comment in which Nas claims, Nas claims, that I am an agent of Lucifer. I'm an agent of Lucifer because Nas has a different opinion than I do about the Michael Jackson Leaving Neverland documentary. There's a lot to be said about this podcast. When I first put it up, I knew that people would have differing opinions, and believe me when I tell you, I fully welcome that. But it was so weird because the podcast went up, and then everybody started responding and, giving their thoughts on whether or not they believed Wade or James, and, whether or not they thought Michael's history was suspect. And there was, a normal amount of back and forth, and I was like, that's cool. And there was 50 likes and 1 dislike. And then all of a sudden, in a barrage, a bunch of people hit the comment section, in which the vast majority of them are not subscribers. And it was all this overwhelming information, like a lawyer sat down and was like, James said he was here at this date, but he wasn't. He was here at this date. If you do your research and you look here, and it was like, whoa, is this like a team of online warriors for Michael Jackson that have his back? And what was crazy about it is If you listen to the podcast, I say over and over again that no one will ever really know what happened. And that's unfortunate because Michael's gone. So you only have the story of these two gentlemen. And unless you were there in that room at that time, there's just no way to know. And if you listen to the podcast, my focus is on the irresponsibility of the parents. That whether you're talking about Michael Jackson, R. Kelly, or anybody else, the parents, it's their job to keep their children safe. That was my point of the entire podcast, is that it really upset me to see how the parents responded in this situation, as they absolutely seemed to be offering their child up as currency. But no one knows, obviously, if this stuff happened. And a lot of the arguments that were made is, well, look, there's a time here where they found that Wade told a lie. And James also told a lie here. And because they told a lie, you can never believe them. You can never believe anything they say. In which I'm going, so that's the criteria. If they've lied in their lifetime, you can never believe anything that they say. I don't know anybody I've ever met that has never told a lie in their lifetime. And I would bet you, if I started reciting things from my childhood when I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, for sure that I would get some details wrong. But I think there's a difference between getting a detail wrong, like, oh, I think I was here on this date, versus Michael Jackson licked my butt. Either you are telling the truth or you are flat out lying. Now, is the possibility of a lot of money enough to make someone tell a big lie? Look, throughout history we've seen that, right? And people make big lies all the time when they think they can get paid. I guess maybe it's just who I am and my character that I can't fathom sitting around and saying, life's gotten hard, so you know what? We know Michael Jackson. So we can just say that he raped us and give these incredible, detailed stories of these horrific sexual assaults, and we're going to get paid. Like that seems like such a massive jump to me. And maybe I'm just naive because it's not in my character to do that. But these guys had to know that no matter what they've done in their lifetime, the second this movie comes out, forever, until they die, they are the dudes that claimed Michael Jackson raped them repeatedly over and over. Like, no matter what, they're never going. In 30 years from now, when people meet Wade Robeson, they will go, oh, you're the Leaving Neverland guy. And they don't know that they'll get money, right? They're going to sue for it, and they're going to try to make money. I assume that's what's going on. But that's a hard jump for me. Having said that, we do live in a world where you are innocent until you're proven guilty. And it's not that I don't believe in that, but we don't live in a world where you can't be suspect of anything. And that's really what I was saying in the podcast, is the behavior of Michael Jackson, having never seen him do anything like with a child as far as sexual or anything like that, and knowing that he won his federal case, that doesn't mean that his behavior just wasn't suspect. If a grown man started sending, messages to my child in any fashion when they were traveling, much less saying, I love you, and choosing an affectionate nickname, like, I would find that incredibly bizarre, and I would put a stop to it immediately. And there was no chance that I would allow any adult to come to my house and spend the night, or, I've been all over this in the podcast, so I don't want to go down this whole lane again. But my point in the podcast is I found the greatest tragedy to be in the behavior of the parents. But there was this small group of 5 or 6 people that hit that podcast, And they did it at once, and it was like it went from like 1 thumbs down to like 12 thumbs down in a minute. And it was like, whoa. And there was all these multiple postings, and it was all this stuff and all this crazy detailed research. And it was like, do your research, Chad, and do your research. Yo, I did not present the podcast as a case I was making in court. I was reviewing a movie. I was reviewing a documentary. I'm not charging Michael Jackson with any crime. I'm not taking Michael Jackson to court. I was responding to a movie and giving my honest opinion about it. I'm not an agent of Lucifer. I'm not working for the devil. Far too selfish for me. I actually studied Satanism in college during my religious studies courses. If you ever get the chance to actually put time into what Satanism is, it's about the most selfish religious denomination you could ever imagine. So I don't know why she would say that. I don't. If Nas is a she, maybe it's a he. I don't know why that was said. And a lot of times it happens because when people have that anonymous platform behind the keyboard, they grow big muscles, lose their manners, and start talking crazy shit. And it just always blows my mind. It always blows my mind. So that's that. I do not work as an agent for good old Lucifer. Okay, sorry, I got a little long-winded there. Number 3, Jonathan asked, if you thought shooting the I Am 6 episode was a mistake, why didn't you quit the episode while filming? And it's a great question, but Jonathan, when I'm talking about it now, I'm looking back 2020, you know what I mean? It's like I could see everything that's happening, in a linear way now, and the time you're in the middle of it, you're figuring it out as it's happening. So by the time you start really putting pieces together, you're 2.5, days through the 3-day shoot. And at that point, my gut instinct is to still try to help. It's still try to help even if we can't. I'm not a person that has, a quitting demeanor. It's just not something that I do. When I dedicate myself to something, I finish it. And in retrospect, looking back, I wish we'd have never gone there. But in the moment, I didn't know what I was dealing with in the moment. I was figuring it out, which is why I didn't obviously walk away from it. And by the time I did, like I said, I don't want to abandon people. I tried to do the best that I could when I was there. But it's a great question. So Liz asks, you talk about the groupies in music. Are there groupies in the paranormal field? If so, any stories that you can share? Liz, there are groupies in the paranormal. There's groupies in everything. Anything that you do that's on TV or in the public spotlight, I can promise you there's going to be groupies. And some of them are really cool people, and maybe some aren't. But, like I said, when I was a young man, and that's what I was referencing in that podcast, I was just stating that I feel like films always give these girls such a bad rap, and I think it's not deserved or undeserving, I guess. But I was surprised the first time I went to a big paranormal event where there was like 1,000 people there and a bunch of speakers, and I was on the panel. Like, I was blown away by how much of that type of thing was going on. And I was blown away by how many married women were on the prowl, you can say. I'm in a different time in my life right now, so obviously, I'm not, like partaking in that world versus where I was as a young man. When I do these events and speaking events, I pretty much got my day dialed, and I show up, I do my thing, I meet the fans and the people that support, I make sure that they know how much I care, and I'm back to my hotel room to work the rest of the day. Like, that's pretty much how my drill goes. But I can tell you a fairly funny story that happened at my first ever show in Australia. And my entire team was there to witness this. And I'm going to change some of the details because I don't want to out this person and make them feel bad. Again, they weren't trying to do anything horrible, but it was a funny story. We had showed up at our first event, and there was a woman there with her son, and her son was roughly 19, 20 years old, maybe a little younger, maybe 16, 17, somewhere in around like a senior graduating around that age. And they had both went to the event. They got VIP tickets, and they were both very nice, very cool. And I could tell the mom wanted to get me alone to talk to me because she kept making statements like, well, I really hope at some point throughout the night, you know, we'll get a chance to step away and talk. In which I kept thinking, well, why do we have to step away and talk? I mean, we can talk right now. So I started realizing, okay, she has something that she's not comfortable saying in front of everybody else. So I honestly started thinking it was like something to do with the demonic or the paranormal. A lot of times when people have stories of the demonic or things that happen in their home that they think, are crazy, they don't like sharing that. And I say crazy, not like mentally crazy, but like they're shocked by what's occurring in their home. And they're not comfortable sharing it in a big room with a bunch of people because they don't want to be judged. So I started thinking, well, she must be having something going on in her home, and she's just not comfortable blaring it out. So she wants to get me alone to talk to me about it. So I said to her, after she had made the comment, hopefully there'll come a time where we could step away. I said, well, after the show, after we do the autograph signings and pictures and stuff like that, I said, just hang out a little bit. And before we do the official VIP get-together, we'll take a few minutes and we can talk. And she said, fair enough. So we get to the end of the event. Everything goes great. And I see her hanging out with her son, with my team of people that I'm traveling with. And specifically, her son actually hit it off with Joey really well. So they're talking back and forth. The odd thing is also, her son was a spitting image of Ryan Buell, like separated at birth. It was crazy how much he looked like Ryan Buell. It was crazy. So anyways, I see them all kind of talking, and I'm thinking, well, maybe now is a good time just to, take 5 minutes and, hear her out and see what's going on. And maybe I can just give her some advice or point her in the right direction, that type of thing. So I go up and I say, hey, if you have a few minutes, we can go talk now. And she says, okay. She goes, we need to, get far enough away where no one can hear us talk. And I said, no, I agree. That's fine. And she was like, is it okay, if my son hangs out with your guys? And I said, oh, yeah, that's cool. He's hanging out with Joey right now. He'll be totally cool. So, yeah, it's cool. So we actually walk quite a ways away from my group, and we start talking. And she says, I don't know how to say this stuff, so I'm just going to say it. And I'm paraphrasing right now. This isn't verbatim, word for word, what she said. But she says, I want to make a documentary. And I'm like, whoa, this already took a different turn than I thought. And I go, what, do you know some like location or a case that you want to do? And I'm thinking it's going to be paranormal. And she says, well, no, it's not paranormal. And she says, I have a unique job. And I'm like, okay. And she goes on to explain that she is a sex therapist. And she has honed and developed a method that can make a man have an orgasm for up to an hour with very minimal touching and no actual intercourse. And I'm staring at her like, okay, I'm obviously not in this field, So I say to her, I go, okay, and she goes, yeah, and I don't really know how to get started. And she's feeling me out to kind of see what my response is. And I say to her, I go, well, like any project, either reputation or proof of concept, are going to get it started, and you need support, you need help, especially if it's an independent project. You need financing, you need, support in locations, support in travel, logistics, all of it, And I'm kind of focusing on that end because I don't want to go to the sexual end. And she goes, well, yeah, I've been thinking about maybe approaching some footballers. And over there, footballers are rugby players. And I'm like, why would you approach, why are they your target goal? And I think they were her target goal because the idea being that in Australia, rugby guys are huge. It's like our NBA, like it's like our LeBron, you know. If I'm correct, I think that was the reasoning is that these people would have the ear of society. So she goes, "Well, are you interested in how this all works?" And I'm like, well, "And how what works?" And she's like, "Well, having an orgasm for that long." And I'm like, "Why? Hey, look, you know, it sounds interesting, you know." And again, I'm trying not to roll into this conversation. And it has nothing to do with her. She was a beautiful girl or something. It's just like I'm a grown man. I just that's not my world anymore, you know. And she pauses and she was like, "Well, if you have a little bit of time, I can do a demonstration." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And she was like, "If you have a little bit of time, I can do a demonstration for you." And I'm like, "For me?" And I'm like, "So what do you have somebody here?" And she goes, "No, for you." So I did what I felt, you know, to be the best thing to do in these situations, which is to just be very forward, in which I just said, "Sweetheart, I appreciate it. I appreciate the attraction. I appreciate all of that. It's not going to happen. I'm not interested in that. If this is a real project, then I can give you some real advice as far as, you know, getting things off the ground." I'm like, "But when it comes to the sexual side of what you're doing, it's not something that I can get involved with. And I definitely can't go upstairs and have you show me your abilities." So she was, you know, nice about my response. I could tell she was somewhat embarrassed, which I didn't want her to be, but there was no way to avoid it. And we had a few awkward, you know, conversation moments talking about the business side of making films, and then we quickly made our way back over to the group. But yes, you know, there's groupies in every scenario, and the reason I never knock them, and the reason why I hate the term groupie, is it just has so many negative connotations, and I don't think it's negative to see someone doing something that you're fascinated by and have that cause some sort of physical attraction. I think it happens with everybody on planet Earth. Anybody who's ever been to a concert or a movie or anything like that, you have those types of emotions. And if you're at a place in life where you can live a lifestyle like that, then more power to you. So that was really my point in the Groupies podcast. So I hope that story suffices. I hope that story, you know, is what you were looking for, because I'm definitely not telling any other ones when I was younger, so that's for sure. Okay, here we go. Question number 5. In response to the Kurt Cobain documentary, Carrie says Nick Broomfield is a moron. Carrie, what are you talking about? No, listen, I completely understand. Nick Broomfield is one of those documentarians that you're going to hate him or you're going to love him. What I love about him is his braveness. I mean, I just watched his documentary on the Grim Sleeper, which is the LA serial killer that killed like 150 African American prostitutes, and he was able to do this for years, and like nobody cared because LA's corrupt as hell and the cops were corrupt, and they just didn't care because it was prostitutes that were from the hood that were winding up missing. Nobody was looking. It's a horrible story of something very real that happened, and you know, his braveness, like when Nick hits the ground, you know, he puts on the headphones, he's got his filmer, and the guy drives directly to the middle of the hood and just starts at point A. Let me go talk to this prostitute and see who she knows. And he just goes from there. And his fearlessness is just unlike anything I've ever seen. In the Biggie and Tupac documentary, there's this long story about how, you know, Mopreme Shakur, Tupac's brother, was, you know, made to drink, reportedly, you know, Suge Knight's urine. And Now imagine this. Like I could never sit across from Mo Preem and ask him if that was true. I mean, especially if I don't know him. If it was true, this is an incredibly sensitive topic. Not Nick. Nick will let it fly. He will let it fly. So is it true that you drank? I mean, he is just so freaking fearless, and uh, I'm blown away by it. And his comedy to me is hilarious. But I think his best work, if you really want to see two documentaries back to back that are mind blowing, watch the documentaries of Eileen Wuornos, who was the movie Monster was made about her. Charlize Theron played her. It's a true story. It was the world's quote, or the first, if you believe this, female serial killer, and she went to death row and was executed. And she developed this really, really strong relationship with Nick, and it's a really serious, set of films, and his braveness in that again is just mind blowing. But Nick has an odd sense of humor. He likes fucking with people, and so yes, I can see how somebody would either love him or hate him. I love him. I think he is awesome, and he's a super nice guy. I was just texting with him a couple days ago, and every time I check in with him, he responds in 2 seconds, and he's got a crazy memory, very, very sharp memory, and he's just generally a cool guy. I mean, the day that I met him, that I got his wallet for him because it was locked in the post office, literally within 2 hours, he had me over to his house, and we were sitting around talking film, and it was surreal. I was like, what is going on? This dude that's like a legend to me, I just met him, and now 2 hours later, I'm in his home. It was just crazy. So, and that's like he lives his life like he makes his films. Just he goes on instinct and sheer willpower to get things done. And I also like the fact that he knows the value of legend and lore, and that's why he starts at ground zero. He starts like with the Grim Sleeper story. It's not like he couldn't have started with the man that was arrested for it. He started, with the prostitute on the street corner that heard all the stories about the Grim Sleeper, and he starts following these legends until they either prove themselves to be fake or not, and he keeps going. And in that documentary, he winds up hanging out with the Grim Sleeper's two best friends who, before it's over, are giving him evidence that nobody else could uncover but him because he developed these friendships. He's just a fascinating, fascinating director. And Kurt and Courtney, as entertaining as it is, I don't think it's his best work. But regardless, I did like it. I liked it a lot. I liked the other one, Soaked in Bleach, a lot better, just because of the context and what it was and the amount of evidence put forward by Mr. Grant. But come on, don't call Nick a moron. No, it's all good. We all got our opinions, So there's many people that love my work and many people that hate it, So it kind of comes with the field, and I think Nick would say that too. So, Nick, I had your back, man. I had your back, bro. So, okay, number 6. Jill asked if I'm ever going to do a podcast on the update of the Sir No Face Two Face case. Yeah, actually, very soon. Very soon. I think that might be a good one to have Craig on. I just don't like the sound of phone call interviews. It just sounds ugly and it's hard to listen to. I would like to do an update with Craig sitting right next to me and record the podcast that way. And I'm going to see Craig next month because he's coming in at the end of May for our AGH Birthday Bash event, which is going to be at the Thomas House in Red Boiling Springs, Tennessee. There's still a few tickets left to that. You can get them at aghtelevision.com. So Craig's going to come in, and we got a 3-night, 4-day weekend filled with ghost hunts and seminars and presentations at the Thomas House. So I'm super stoked about that. So maybe that'll be a perfect time to do the update with Craig. So, Okay, Lance said, I would love to see you sit down with Joe Rogan and ask if I've ever attempted to contact Joe directly. No, I haven't. And I know that might sound weird because Callan's a buddy of mine and they're like best friends. But, when I mentioned it to Callan and he just said, Joe doesn't believe in that, he would never do it, he would never touch ghosts, that type of stuff. I'm not the guy that runs around trying to ride on people's coattails and like I'm fully willing to build my own thing. I mean, I've always done that. I love owning and controlling everything that I do. Um, so as much as I would love to go on Joe's show and really have an honest debate with him and show him the evidence of Sir No Face and the paranormal and everything that I've collected that's going to be in the 74 Minutes documentary, um, I just haven't pursued it openly because I could see where Joe's mind state is from his show, and Callan told me this as well too. Would I go on a show? Absolutely. I would love to go on a show and say, I totally get where you're coming from when you say you think all these things are fake because all the TV shows and all this. But that's TV, man. Like, let's get to the real research. If you really want to go over cases and see real research and real footage, then it's out there, man. It's out there, and the evidence is overwhelming. So, will it ever happen? Will I ever go on? I don't know. It really just depends on if that opportunity presents itself. Again, when I spoke to Callan, he just said there are a lot of people that are in the paranormal have tried to get on the show, and he just shoots them down. And I'm certainly not going to grovel or beg or anything like that. If he wants to have a conversation about that stuff, I'm here. Callan knows that as well. And, it just is what it is. Again, I'm a fan of the show. I'm a fan of the show. And I think that from his demeanor, I do. I think Joe and I would probably get along pretty well. I think. But who knows? Like I said, even beyond me, there's a lot of other people in the paranormal that I would love to see him. I would love to see him sit down with Lord Arbach. That would be, really impressive. Or Kieran O'Keefe. That's another guy. I mean, there are serious dudes, man, that aren't focused on reality TV, that have done their homework and research. So they're out there. Anyways, so, okay. Thank you for that, Lance. Katie says, I follow you on Facebook and I saw you've lost 50 pounds. Congrats. How did you do it? Any advice? Katie, my whole life I've gone back and forth on weight. Between my freshman and sophomore year in high school, I lost 120 pounds. And, on Paranormal State, I was probably around 330 pounds. Right now, I'm right around 250. I think the difference, like this time, is every other time before, it was like diets. It was like, okay, I'm going to do a diet and I'm going to just, starve myself into losing 30 pounds. And then it slowly comes back on over the course of a year, plus some. This time around, I started well over a year ago. And it's not a diet, it's just a life change. I just don't do a ton of sugars at all. I do a little bit of carbs, not much. Most of it is protein. I only eat 2 meals a day. The total meal that I eat in both days is not bigger than my fist. And I'll tell you what, one of the big keys is I drink a shitload of water. I just drink a ton of water, probably 15 to 20 glasses a day of water. And that's been a big, big difference. And I also don't weigh myself, every day or every week. I weigh myself once a month. I don't think about it outside that. And, if I only lose 1 pound in a month, I'm okay with that. I'm happy. Uh, I know where my goal is. And my goal was if a month goes by and I weigh less, whether it's 1 pound or 20, even if it's just 1 pound, that's positive. That's in the right direction. So my mind state isn't in like some panic to lose weight when I started. It was like over time, every month I want to lose weight. And that's just basically it. I'm not on a diet. I've just changed my lifestyle. And I think if you're willing to do that, you'll find success for sure. So, But thank you, Katie, for following, and I appreciate the comment. Okay, Jeremiah asked if I wrote the poem in the trailer to 74 Minutes. This is also from my Facebook as well. Yeah, Jeremiah, I did. I wrote the poem for that, which is really about my experiences and the importance of those 74 minutes of footage. I've been writing poetry since I was like 10 years old. I know it's not like a manly thing to do, but some of my favorite authors are also poets. Edgar Allan Poe, has written some of the craziest, coolest shit ever, and I've always done it. I've never done it commercially. I've never been like, I'm going to go make a book of poetry or sell it. I've probably got 2,000 pages of original poetry. It's just something I love. I love to paint powerful images in people's minds so they can better understand what I'm talking about. And that's how I look at words. I look at words like they're colors, man. And if you use the right combination, you get the right sheen and the right light, then suddenly everything just makes sense and it's beautiful. So I've always done that. And the other reason why that's in the trailer is there's a second version of the trailer that I'm working on. I'm going to release here in a day or two. And I'm doing an interview in the beginning. This is back in 2010. And this girl from the Daily Nebraskan says, how do you investigate these locations? I could never do it. I'm just so freaked out. And I said to her, sure you could. It's just about focus. And I talk about the fact, and this is very much a fact, if you watch a lot of my films, if you look at times, you'll see my lips are barely moving. Whenever I'm freaked out, when I'm ghost hunting and I go into a place, I will start writing and reciting poetry about my experience as I'm doing it while I'm doing it, because it's a way for me to put my body in that location but have control of my mind and be focusing on something else. Because fear happens when you're focusing on the anticipation of something bad happening. So change your focus and you can get over that fear. So I would do that a lot of the times when I investigate. I would just start writing stuff in my head and change my focus so I wouldn't freak out because I was so, scared. And that's a real part of my kind of ghost hunting process. And, also the way I looked at it is if I'm in a room and I'm focused on poetry and I'm reciting it in my brain and I'm rewriting it and doing all this, in order to break that focus, something big is going to have to happen. And I'm looking to film big evidence. All right. I want big evidence. So to break that focus, something big is going to have to happen in order to break it. And when that happens, I'm like, I'm stoked at this point because I feel like, okay, if something shifted, something slammed, something flew and broke that focus, then that camera caught it. That's why you got the camera there. That's your eyes and ears to the world. That's what people are going to judge. So it's really just a process of turning my body into a walking tripod. I'm just there to carry the camera. But that's always been a part of my process, is to recite poetry in my head as I am ghost hunting to overcome fear or anxiety. So, okay, and our last question, in response to the YouTube Conspiracy Podcast, Mark asks, is there any further issues with YouTube trying to censor your podcast? At first I didn't even think that it was like trying to censor as much as they're just trying to rip everybody off. But there's been some weird stuff, man. Like, okay, 2 podcasts ago, I uploaded the podcast and I hadn't even put in the title or the description yet. I clicked upload, went to the bathroom, came back, turned on the monetization, and before the titles are even in there, there's nothing in there. It comes back saying limited monetization. It's just like, whoa, hold on. Like, you haven't even seen the text that goes in there. And at the same time, this podcast was the freaking glove episode. What could possibly, be stopping advertisers from wanting to, show their advertisements over the glove podcast? It made no sense. Also, I recently received a comment, which I'll put right here. You can see it, where my subscriptions are now being canceled, where people are being pushed off, or they'll subscribe to me and they'll show up the next day and be like, yo, why am I not subscribed to Chad anymore? And you can see that in this comment. So why is that happening? I don't know. You tell me, guys. But what really has been driving me crazy is I've gotten like 6 or 7 Universal Music copyright claims that I had to go through all kinds of crap to get it removed. And what's ridiculous about that is the only music in the podcast is my song. Like, that song is called Road Less Traveled at the beginning. That's my song. I wrote it, I'm singing it. That's In a Crowded Room, my musical project. That's it. Outside of that, there's no music. There's no music. So how is the Universal Music Group claiming copyright over my podcast? So it's been brutal. Like I said, there's been all kinds of content stuff that I've had to submit for manual reviews, and then it comes back. Sometimes they'll allow you to do a limited advertisement. Sometimes they just say no forever, period. And it's completely unfair. It's whack. I'm going to keep doing it because, like I said, this is a labor of love. I love this show. I love it. And that's why podcasts sometimes come out at 4 or 5 in the morning, because by the time I'm done working, it's midnight. And that's the time I have to go do it. And, it's really frustrating when you do something that you love and you put so much into it, and then the platform that you're on is either stopping you from making anything off of it, or they're just claiming it. The Universal Music Group is going, thanks, cool. We get all the money off this. So, and believe me, guys, when I said this is not about getting rich at all, this is literally about covering like my time and just wanting to be able to sustain. And a lot of you guys have made donations, which that's awesome. And the reason I love it, beyond it obviously helps with the production of all of this stuff, and it helps cover the time and all that. What I love about it is we just don't have a need for advertisers like we would if we didn't have donations. I don't want to have to care and watch what I say. I don't want to have to censor and block my words. I don't want to have thought cops over my shoulder going, you can't tell that story. If you do, we're going to give you a strike. YouTube has gone off the rails with this, and it absolutely feels like they are attempting to make people conform and speak about what they want them to speak about, and speak about what you speak about in the nature in which they feel you should speak about it. And like I said, when I'm getting warnings saying this, podcast has been flagged before I even put in the titles or any of the, words that the algorithm reads, I mean, that tells you right there that they're just selecting videos and shutting them down, So why would they be doing that on my page? I don't know. But when you start getting Universal Media Group copyrights and they're taking all the money, I mean, when there's no music in the podcast, again, all of it feels corrupt. And there's enough, videos out there. Research this. Go in and type in the YouTube conspiracy. It's a very real thing that the biggest podcasters talk about it. The shadow banning and the content and how they basically control what makes it out there, to the world. And I think that for whatever reason, a lot of my podcasts are falling into their wheelhouse of awareness. And just know that I sincerely appreciate all of your support. I'm going to keep making this podcast. So thank you all so much. Thank you for listening to this podcast. This is episode number 39. We've got 40 coming up tomorrow. I'm going to blink my eyes and we're going to be at number 50. Can you imagine that? Already almost 50 podcasts in. Crazy. And again, it grows every week, guys, every single week. So thank you. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for listening. You guys are freaking awesome. I appreciate it so much. So I will be back again tomorrow with another podcast. Until then, you guys take care, and I will talk to you soon. All the best.